In 2005, the newspaper industry in America made $49 billion a year selling advertising. That same year, a small classifieds website called Craigslist was still mostly a free email list for renting apartments in San Francisco. 17 years later, its newspaper ad revenue had collapsed to under $10 billion. Not a decline, a disappearance. More than 80% of the industry's core revenue gone in less time than it takes a kid to grow up and read the news for themselves. And yet, right now, you can buy an entire local newspaper, building, printing contract, subscriber list, and all, for less than the price of a nice house. Which raises the real question. Is that a bargain, or is it the most expensive mistake you could possibly make? Let's actually open the books. For most of the 20th century, owning the local paper was one of the best businesses in America. You had a near-total local monopoly on classified ads, the section where people paid to sell a car, list a job opening, or find an apartment. Classifieds alone could account for close to 40% of a paper's entire ad income. Then the internet did to classifieds what it did to travel agents and video stores. Craigslist, and later Facebook Marketplace and specialized job boards, offered the same service for free. According to Pew Research, newspaper advertising revenue peaked at $49.4 billion in 2005. By 2022, it had fallen to $9.8 billion, an 80+% collapse in under 2 decades. Since 2005, more than 500 American newspapers have shut down entirely, and the industry has lost well over 40,000 journalism jobs. Here's the mistake almost every first-time buyer makes. They find a struggling paper listed for a few $100,000. A business that would have sold for tens of millions a generation ago, and they think they've found a steal they haven't. That low price isn't a bargain. It's a mirror. It's telling you, honestly, exactly how much revenue has already walked out the door. Buying the paper cheap doesn't bring the classified advertisers back. It doesn't undo the fact that a national chain that used to spend $50,000 a year on print ads now spends it on a $5 a day social media campaign that reaches 10 times as many people. You're not buying a discount, you're buying what's left. Running a real newspaper still costs real money, and most of it hasn't gotten any cheaper. A small daily with a print run of 10,000 copies needs a printing press, or far more commonly today, a contract with an outside printing plant, anywhere from a few thousand to tens of thousands of dollars a month, depending on volume. You need at least 4 to 6 reporters to actually cover a town properly, at salaries that typically run $35,000 to $50,000 a year each in most local markets, plus editors, a distribution system, and, increasingly non-negotiable, a website that has to be maintained and updated constantly, stacking real digital infrastructure costs on top of everything print already demands. Then there's the cost that never goes away: newsprint, the actual paper the news gets printed on. Newsprint pricing is notoriously volatile, at times climbing more than 20% in a single year because of supply constraints and mill closures. A paper that budgets off last year's paper costs can see its printing bill jump by tens of thousands of dollars with zero warning. And unlike a retailer, you can't just quietly raise your price to cover it. Not when your remaining subscribers are already asking why they're paying for news they could get free somewhere else. There are really 3 revenue streams left, and the mix between them decides whether a paper survives. Subscriptions, print and digital combined, are now the base of the business, a shift that would have sounded insane to a publisher in 1995. A local paper typically charges $10 to $25 a month for a digital subscription, and the papers that survive have learned something counterintuitive. A small, deeply loyal base of paying readers matters more than a huge audience that never pays a cent. Advertising still matters, but it's mostly local businesses now, not national chains, and it's a fraction of what it once was. And increasingly, papers stack on event revenue, sponsored content, and even commercial printing services for other local businesses. Anything to diversify beyond a core product that no longer funds the operation on its own. Let's run actual numbers. A small local paper with 8,000 digital subscribers, paying an average of $12 a month, generates roughly $1.15 million a year in subscription revenue alone. Add local advertising, call it $400, $0 a year, and total revenue lands around $1.55 million. Against that, staff costs, printing, distribution, overhead, and software eat up roughly $1.25 million. That leaves somewhere around $300,000 in profit. Modest, but real. A version of this business that's actually survivable, if everything holds steady. And that's exactly the problem. Everything has to hold steady. That $300,000 profit assumed subscriber growth keeps pace, and newsprint costs stay flat. Neither is guaranteed. Lost just 15% of your subscriber base. to a competing free news source, or simply the ongoing decline in local news habits, and that $300,000 in profit turns into a loss within a single year. Not because costs exploded, but because almost none of them move. Staff, printing contracts, rent, they're fixed. Revenue is the only variable in the equation, and it's the one quietly bleeding out underneath you every single quarter. This is the real lesson of the modern newspaper business. The papers that survive aren't chasing the biggest audience anymore. They're the ones that found a small, genuinely loyal group of paying readers and built an operation lean enough to serve them profitably, instead of trying to resurrect a mass market model that died with print advertising. If the math is this thin, why did Jeff Bezos buy the Washington Post? Why did Patrick Soon-Shiong buy the Los Angeles Times? For them, this was never primarily a profit play. Owning a major paper buys influence, a platform, and a kind of civic standing that almost no other asset can purchase at a similar price. The paper itself might lose money every single year, and against the size of a multi-billion-dollar fortune, it barely registers. What they're actually purchasing is relevance in a city, or a country, something that doesn't show up on a balance sheet, but is worth far more to them than the number at the bottom of it. Picture the good year. Subscriptions grow modestly, local advertisers stay loyal, newsprint prices hold flat. The paper nets around $300, enough to hire one or two more reporters and keep the operation genuinely healthy. Now the bad year. A major local employer closes, cutting into ad revenue. A free digital competitor launches and pulls away younger readers. Newsprint spikes. Revenue drops by $200,000 while costs rise by another $100,000. And that $300,000 profit becomes a $200,000 loss. A $500,000 swing. In a newsroom that was already lean to begin with, that forces layoffs almost immediately. That's the real shape of owning a newspaper today. It's no longer the business that printed money almost by accident, the way it did for most of the last century. It's a business that survives on discipline, a genuinely loyal paying audience, and an owner who understands something uncomfortable. They're not really selling advertising anymore. They're selling trust, in a market where trust has quietly become the one thing left that people are still willing to pay for.